Welcome to our webinar with the Chronicle today. We're really excited to be spending the next hour with you talking about this topic around what student-centered support will look like in 2026. Just a quick intro of myself. I'm Josie Sutcliffe. I'm lead the marketing team here at Mongoose. I feel really privileged to work at Mongoose with so many amazing institutions across higher ed. I've been in marketing my entire career, working in technology, and have spent a lot of that time in the sort of learning and technology ed tech space.
Hard to follow that, but I'll give it a shot, Josie. It's great to be here with you for the webinar today. My name is Jason Porter, and my role at Mongoose is to support our customer team. So I get the privilege of working with our customers all over the U.S. to ensure that they are receiving all of the great support and services that Mongoose is committed to. And like you, it's just such a thrill to be a part of a meaningful organization supporting such a critical part of the students' journey within college and university. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Right, just a few quick FAQs. So feel free to use the chat throughout. It's always great to see an engaged group in chat, sharing ideas and commenting amongst each other. Closed captions are enabled. We are recording this webinar. It'll be shared with you after the fact. And in terms of Q&A, add Q&A questions to the Q&A pane anytime. We're going to keep an eye on that. So we'll try to answer them as we go, but if not, we'll save some time at the end for questions that we've missed. And of course, we always invite you to engage with us on social media. And you saw on the previous slide, Jason and my LinkedIn profiles. Please connect with us there. So to dive right in, we wanted to start with this Slido. We're going to use Slido in a few places throughout the session. So you can scan the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter the number you see there on the screen. So we would love you to start by telling us what your role is. So just use whatever words best describe your role. And I'm going to give everyone a moment to scan that. And I can see that people are typing. So academic advisor comes in strong at the start.
The screen's going to fill up fast, isn't it,
It
Josie?
is going to fill up. We have a lot of people on today, so it's going
Yeah,
to be interesting to see how the role descriptions overlap. So academic advisor, student success coach being the strongest here, but a lot of the other roles being described certainly fall in that category. Let's see, what else do we see here, Jason?
yeah. I need to see some folks from TRIO programs on the call. Always
Yeah.
excited to have folks doing that great work, participating in our programs. That's great. Trauma therapist. I think we could all use one of those, maybe. So
Call me after.
yeah, really.
Financial aid. This is great. Lots around just student success, student affairs, support, instructor. So some people on the teaching side, persistence.
Absolutely.
This is great. And some
Lots of
students.
different. Yeah,
Welcome to our students as well. All right.
absolutely. Good executives on the call, staff on the call. Great. What a great group. Thank you all for taking the time to be here.
Yeah. All right. One more question for you before we dive into the content. When you think about your role, what are the main challenges you're facing today? So give us a word or two about that.
This is where that trauma therapist could help us all out maybe a little bit.
Yeah. You notice as in your role,
Right.
not in
Yeah.
your life. Although really the two are interrelated. Okay. I realized I should have done this as a word cloud. I realized I didn't, but okay, good. It is summing some. So we've got some themes around students, student engagement, retention.
I've seen resources pop up here a number of times. Kind of
Yeah, budget
challenges.
challenges.
Mhm.
Yeah. Non-traditional students, how UI students using
Ooh.
AI, motivation, students not going to class, parent helicopters. I read
Oh,
an interesting article about that not too long ago. Mental health challenges are a theme. Um,
As a parent of two college students, I take offense to the parent helicopter comment.
I just want to know, have you shown up and taken notes in their class yet? Because
No.
apparently that has happened. I read
Oh,
an article about it.
no way.
Okay, good. Good to hear. All right. This is getting stressful. Lots of challenges that you all face. We're going to keep these in mind as we go forward today. So thank you so much for contributing that. And I hope it was a little therapeutic for you as well, getting to share your challenges. So this is our agenda. We're going to start by giving you a few minutes of context so that we don't get you saying, wait, what? What are you talking about? So we'll start with that. Then we're going to move on to explaining a bit what we mean about today anyway, when we're talking about success and failure. And then how we're thinking anyways, what we're seeing from our customers around how they're thinking about supporting students, specifically with this idea of how we provide self-service kind of 24/7
Mm.
support to students, and also how the role conversations play in that. We're going to share some learnings from data that we've seen across millions of conversations and give you some really actionable, tangible things to think about that and incorporate in your in how you work with students and your other stakeholders. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the not so far off future around AI assistants and AI agents. And then at the end, as mentioned, we'll save some time for Q&A. So, Jason, I'll pass to you to kick us
Sure.
off with some
Yeah,
context.
that's great. Thank you, Josie. And I'm really looking for this conversation as folks were listing some of their challenges. I saw a number of things that we're going to talk about today. So, with any of these conversations, we want to ensure we provide you some real takeaways, and that's what we're going to focus on. But just to set the stage for how we as an organization come to this conversation today and think about our place in the student's journey. For those that may not be familiar with Mongoose, we founded this organization really with a goal of moving people forward and delivering communications and empathy at scale. And we do that through a number of communication tools. We're really thrilled to support over 1,000 organizations across the US at this point in their journey around student communication. And what's really important about that is it gives us insights that no other organization has. We literally have hundreds of millions of conversations flowing through the Mongoose technology that, with the power of AI, we're now able to gather insights from that were never available to us or our clients before. And so that's the framing which we kind of bring to this conversation today. The other thing you're going to hear us talk a lot about is this idea of conversation intelligence. And so just to be clear about what that means for us as an organization, we kind of break the two halves of that statement apart. And when we talk about conversations, we're really talking about, as you would imagine, an exchange of information between two parties that's happening over a period of time. And it's really, so it's not a one-way kind of blasting of information to a group of people, but it is the back and forth exchange of information. And then we think about the intelligence that now we have access to from these conversations that we never had before. And the reason that's really important, Josie's going to go into talking about failure as a topic. That was one of the key kind of points of our conversation today. And failure is a great learning tool if we have the right information and the right data that comes out of those failures to help us improve. And so that's what, when we think about intelligence, that's what we're talking about there. Help us solve problems. We're also going to talk a lot about connecting the student experience. And as some of that information was going across the screen about challenges, I saw disconnected data and systems included. And that certainly is a challenge that we're all facing as technology has really proliferated our campuses. The student experience today is pretty disconnected. We'll talk about that. And so our mission is to bring this together into a more cohesive communication strategy that helps our students really understand what we expect of them, what we need of them, and that they can ask questions in real time and get access to information. So we do that through the Mongoose Conversation Intelligence Platform, which is really made up of two complementary components. One is providing in a consolidated place all of the key communication tools that are really necessary today to connect with today's students in the way that they want to be connected with. So these are things like text and chat features, as well as WhatsApp technology to communicate with international students. Um, those things are not new in of themselves, but the part we're really excited about and that we're going to talk a lot about today is what intelligence is now available to us in these conversations through the power of AI to help us really drive meaningful change in our organizations that is directly tied to the mood, the sentiment, and the feelings of our students, which we can now really understand in a way that we could never before. And we do that through using AI. And we're going to go into more detail here, but using AI to truly analyze the topics, the sentiments, the feelings that are being lifted out of these conversations that are happening in a way that gives us data that we can act on. So that's the context. Josie, do you want to take us more into this topic around failure and success and how we think about that?
Yeah, I'm not going to take it personally that you just associated me with failure, but
No, 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 please.
all right. So, how we think about success today, and a lot of this I think came up actually when you all shared your challenges. I think your challenges are often another way of describing what success would look like, is you need to overcome these challenges in order to achieve these results. So, what we hear consistently whenever we ask questions around this is, look, we really need to increase student success. That's job number one. And that's directly related with improving retention, increasing enrollment, if that's, if your area is in the enrollment area, creating a sense of belonging for students, retaining students, which, student and staff wellness are key to achieving those goals. So, you know, when you think about how success looks like today and how the goals you're ultimately driving towards, these are the sorts of things that are important to understand. So then you can understand, okay, well, what's the flip of that? What's the failure side of that? And what we're really going to dig into today is thinking about the small failures that really prevent or diminish your success with those objectives and challenges that we talked about on the previous slide and at the very beginning of this session. So small failures, you can see some examples here. It's as simple as when a student misses their advisor appointment, or doesn't understand why their financial aid was declined, or feels like the response they got from someone was robotic, or maybe they got no response to their question, or um, these little tiny failures that happen throughout the student life cycle can really impact and act as obstacles to success. So when we dive a little deeper into this idea of what is failure really, one way to think about failure is that it's a signal. When you have a failure, and it can be a small failure like the ones we just talked about, really what it's doing is it's signaling an unmet need that a student has, maybe some unclear processes, they don't know what to do next, communication gaps that exist across the student life cycle. And this grid that you see on the slide is one way to kind of categorize the different types of failures. So starting at the top, minor friction. This is actually a pretty successful quadrant to live in. This is where the student's understanding is high and their willingness to act is high, but maybe there's some little tiny obstacles that are slowing them down. Then let's say the understanding is high. They know what they need to do, but they're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. So that's slowing down their willingness to act. That's a capacity gap. A clarity gap is where they're really ready to act. They want to do the next step, whatever it might be. They want to achieve whatever the goal is. They want to move forward, but they don't really understand what to do or how to do it. So that's a clarity gap. And then finally, a trust gap is, the worst case scenario where there's a low understanding. Maybe they're feeling confused. They're worried about making a mistake. They might be feeling anxious. And so there's also a low ability and willingness to act. So we're going to come back to this quadrant towards the end and just, I guess, keep this map in mind as we go through the next little bit of this webinar. When you think about failure as a funnel, how we engage or we don't engage with students really directly impacts their success. And so this is the failure funnel from this kind of micro perspective. So first is that you miss a connection with a student. The second is this missed connection leads to silence or confusion on the part of the student. This then leads to unresolved needs on the part of the student, which causes them to disengage, which results in a negative outcome. Jason, I know you work so closely with our customers. You included an example of one here on the slide. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like just at the very start, like this is one of the most common things we hear from customers, and it's usually that there is really positive intent. So we, as an example, as an organization was set to send out information about some upcoming financial aid requirements and deadlines, and so they making sure to communicate, but the challenge is that they hadn't thought through, once we've communicated, who's going to be available to receive this information, to engage with the student. And so we're going to talk about ghosting later in the conversation as a kind of a concept, but it's really like a self-inflicted missed connection that starts this process off that you're talking about, right, Josie? So we're gonna go into best practices and some really simple things that folks can do to avoid the front end of this, by putting just better plans in place about how we engage with students post kind of big communication strategies. So that's one that I've seen pretty often come up that we can fix pretty easily.
Great, thanks. All right, I think you're gonna
Yeah. So
now take
speaking
us
of
into this. Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of fixing things, let's spend a little bit of time talking about how we really can support students through a combination, right, of both self-service and more intense conversations. Like these things can work together really well. And when we look at how this impacts our roadmap to student success, I think one of the things that's so critical, not just for students, for all of us, right, is whether we're engaged with work or with school or any of these things, is that we want to be in a place where we really feel like we're being seen, heard, that the organization we're engaging with is going to support us in a way that really addresses who we are as individuals. And we know when that happens, we're on a much stronger path to long-term successful relationship. In this case, getting students all the way through their programs and making them part of the lifelong kind of community of the school that they've successfully completed their coursework with. So, and that in itself can be driven by ensuring that the communications we deliver have considered the empathy that's needed to engage with the student, that they're personalized and they're really timely. I think we'll talk about expectations in a minute, but that is like such a critical part of student expectations today. Back to some of the challenges that came up earlier when we were going through it. I think we all know that one of the things that we face is we operate in this highly siloed, fragmented environment that is the modern day campus or college or university. And that in and of itself, it can be an inhibitor to providing this kind of clear, empathetic, coordinated communication, because we have, a number of different systems that we're all trying to use to communicate with. And again, I think there's always really positive intent here. The challenge is that the environment itself just puts some roadblocks in our way that we have to think about. And so that's what we're gonna spend more time talking about here today, is what some of those roadblocks are. But if we think about like what the actual outcome looks like from a visual perspective, it's kind of like this, right? Like from a student perspective and even from a staff perspective, there is so much information, so much communication moving through these channels that we have available to us today that it is just hard to make sense of it. Again, for our staff as well as for our students. And when we confuse staff and we make their jobs harder, it makes it much more difficult to deliver a great experience to students. And that is being driven by, I think, from a large degree, I mentioned it earlier, but there's been such a proliferation of technology tools, all that do little parts of, the communication lifecycle for a student, but don't bring it together in a really cohesive fashion. And so that's the challenge. I think the other thing we know and we hear a lot about now, and we really isolate this when we talk about it to like the modern day student, but I would say this applies to all of us. I know it applies to me, Josie, probably applies to you too. Like we all now expect instant feedback, clarity, and answers to our questions, right? We're all carrying around a supercomputer in our hands that's got access to every AI tool out there, and we want that information and want it now. And we want it to be hyper personalized because we live in that environment where all of the information that comes our way is, knows a bunch of things about us, probably more than we would like at times. Um, and boy, it's got to be always on. It's got to be happening 24/7. So that also adds to this kind of complexity that we need to sort through when we think about delivering those clear, empathetic messages. The last piece of I would add to this is we think about where Gen Z is spending their time and we look down this list. I'm sure none of us are all that surprised, but the things that aren't on this list are the main communication channels that we still try to employ today to reach them, right? Email being one, it's nowhere on this list. I know my kids, at least all four of them, don't even really know that the phone can be used to speak to another person. So that's not on here either. And where they're spending their time is engaged in these platforms where we have to be able to reach them in a different way.
Great. All right. So, as we mentioned earlier, we have access at Mongoose to data from hundreds of millions of conversations, and we're able to use that data and in an anonymized aggregate fashion to really understand things like what emotions are surfacing for different topics, what the sentiment is from these conversations that are happening through chat and text and WhatsApp and so on. And, what's the resolution status? Are conversations being resolved? Are things being addressed? And, all of this holistic data, matching it up with data from iPads and data from all of our different thousands of users to get to some new insights that can help shape how we interact and engage with students. So we're going to run through 5 key insights and learnings that we've had from this data that you can hopefully put to work in your own lives tomorrow and get some impact and results from. And to those that are just checking in on the slides and recording, yes, they'll both be shared after our webinar today over the next couple of days. So the first big finding is to replace or at least dramatically supplement one-way notifications with two-way conversations. So if you think about a one-way notification, this would be, texting someone information without really crafting that text or that message in a way that drives engagement. So instead of doing that, you want to think about when you're sending messages to students that you're enabling more of a two-way responsive dialogue, more of a conversation with those students. And this is why that matters. When you send when you do no messaging, so no text messaging, maybe you're just emailing. Doing a one-way notification is certainly better than just that because we all know students aren't really watching their email inboxes as much as we'd like them to. So with a notification, like sending a broadcast, you can increase your registration completion, your application to starts, your people turning up at events, people registering for their Pell Grants, and so on. And so that in itself is an improvement. But when you look at actually, and I should say this is based on analysis of our customer data and their results in these areas. When you look at a conversation impact, so where you're actually having a two-way communication with students, and we define a conversation as kind of you're going back and forth with the student, you see a significant increase in the outcomes. And so these examples are on the enrollment side, but they're also true for retention and student success. So, you see the call out here, students who engage in two-way conversations, so those two-way texts, even if it's a brief conversation, are 7.5 times more likely to take action than those that just get the one-way notifications. So when you're thinking about communicating with students, one, think about if you're just doing it in email, think about how you can do it in other channels as well, like meet students where they are on text and WhatsApp and chat. But then also think about how you can engage students in conversations versus these kind of one-way notification blasts. Now there is a time where the one-way notifications and broadcasts make sense. So maybe you just need to do an update or an alert about a cancellation or a safety issue or whatever it might be. That's fine. Those certainly serve a purpose, but there are a number of cases where a conversation is going to be a lot more valuable and help drive towards success versus those little failures that we talked about earlier. So things where you're getting into enrollment or academic counseling, financial aid support, and so on. One key thing we're going to talk about in a moment is around avoiding ghosting by mistake. So when you're sending a one-way message, be clear that it's a notification unless you have a really good way to keep track of student responses and respond to them.
That's such a critical, easy thing to do, right? And it helps avoid some of those failures that you were talking about earlier. Um, a couple areas around just the overall approach to building messages that I think are important takeaways for the group, and maybe not tremendous surprises, but it's always great to see the actual outcomes that you get when you make some of these changes. So the first is really centered, and it's at the top of the screen there, around character length. What we saw very clearly through the study that you mentioned, Josie, was that messages that were shorter, 50 to 100 characters, got 2.5 times the reply rates. And when we saw messages clip over 250 characters, those became the lowest responded messages. So being thoughtful about that is really important. And this is just a really easy way to use AI. I think we all kind of today, we might sit down and craft a message and look at it and go, that's maybe not as tight as I'd like it to be. Using tools, embedded tools in messaging platforms like Mongoose that use AI to help you simplify messages is a really easy way to make this happen. The other thing to really give thought to is, we always see this, and it's kind of down on the list of suggestions there, but demonstrating like enthusiasm and an excitement and finding fun ways to make these messages pop is a really important like approach to getting more engagement into your messages. We see all of our customers that take a little time and build some creativity into their outgoing messages, the outcomes are always better. So those are a few tips. And then the last one, we've talked about it a couple times already. It really ties back into what you were just saying, Josie. Like, if you're going to send a static message, make sure people know that there's not going to be the ability to respond. The alternative is, when you are crafting one-way communications, have a schedule and a path available for students to engage in that response, so that they are, your staff is ready, and the students know they're going to have a way to engage.
Yeah, Jason, there was actually a question from Lauren in the Q&A pane that I think is actually answered on this slide, which Lauren was saying, like, does a two-way conversation by text include just having a student reply yes, no? And the answer is yes, you're right. And that would be a conversation. And it's really this finding here that, messages that ask a direct question with a clear call to action see a 3 times higher engagement rate. So that could be asking a yes, no. We have something in Mongoose called smart messages, which drive significant engagement from students, where you're almost like polling students, like A, B, or how are you feeling about the event coming up? A, B, or C, give them 3 answers and they respond. That simple level of engagement will make a difference. We found that the more conversations you have with students, the higher the success outcomes are. We have some really great data about that just looks at like literally the number of conversations you have. And we had customers that are like, when we have 12 back and forths with students, we get 98% retention. So it's really interesting to see that more and more conversations drive more and more success.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great point. And there's one other note in the chat about kind of examples of creative messages. We are going to share a QR code with you all where you can get this study that was released, and there's a ton of great information in there and some examples that you could pull from. So we'll share that with you in a few more slides.
Yeah, and this next section about don't accidentally ghost students. I don't think any of us want to ghost students, but it can happen. It does happen by accident. Um, this really ties into that be ready to respond. And it also goes back to when we showed you that like failure funnel. Every unfinished interaction you have with students is actually a signal, and you can use those pauses to better support the student, reach out with help, make sure that they aren't being silent or they aren't not completing an action for a sort of negative reason. Students are humans, just like all of us. Sometimes silence feels like it's rejection or disinterest. So you can really do follow-ups and take actions. Just doing a simple check-in can make a big difference. And then when you're doing these engagements with students, even if they're automated, just think about how you can embed kind of empathy and personalization in those responses, so students, feel like there's a warmth there. And so just to
Yeah.
kind of loop it back to this discussion, Jason, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to make one comment too about what you just discussed around like that cycle of communication. And one of the things we're going to get into in just a bit is talking about AI agents. And that is such an important like future approach to making that more efficient and kind of releasing the burden from all of you individually. Because you may hear those things, you're like, I just don't have enough time to follow up on all these things. And that's where AI agents will be such an important piece of it. Um, the last thing I just wanted to say on that funnel slide that you had, Josie, I think a really important point is we do need to shift our thinking a bit about these conversations to not just be points of engagement, but also to be data sources. And so when we're thinking about, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, when we're thinking about, situations that are going to happen that are, we'll call them failures or call them miscommunications, like that now provides us data. And the great news is, if we've got that data, we can come back and make corrections and provide better processes or systems. And maybe to the next slide, one of the examples that we have of that within the Mongoose platform today is we've actually been able to use AI tooling to surface what we call unresolved conversations. So this would be to what you were talking about, Josie, like when we've missed something with a student, which will happen, the system now can actually flag that for us because of, it'll see a question that has been left unresolved. The student was the last one to ask a question and never got a response. We can now up level that in a way through dashboarding that points our staff right to those conversations. I can come in at the beginning of the day, look at those and take action. And so, because of the volume of communication, these things are going to happen. We just need to have the tools to make sure we connect after the fact with the student and close that loop.
Mhm.
And then that's kind of the micro view, right? Like at the student level, but now we can actually zoom out and think about this at the, department level or the organizational level as well. And this data allows us to get into really understanding where we're trending from a positive perspective when it comes to our communication patterns. This example on the screen shows you an admissions office example where we've aggregated up all of the conversation data in a way that allows us to identify what our overall resolution rates are, what the trends are. You can see on the screen, we've got a 95% resolution rate with a 2% uptick in that trend. We can also see where there's challenges and where we need to improve. So we can see that the area that we're having the least success in from a resolution perspective is around scholarships, and that's actually trending down. And so that then gives us the ability to drill in, not only to understand those specific areas, but to look at how we can improve our communication tools and resources to support these processes. So when I say think about it as data, like this is what we can now get our hands around and the guidance we can provide to support your communication patterns.
Yeah, and there's really like a theme that I think that's emerging here in what you're talking about, Jason, which is that, using technology and taking advantage of these kind of data analytics, to be more human and to actually get ahead of those little failures
Yes.
that happen that, really act as obstacles to success.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the other thing is, and this really does tie back to what Jason was just talking about, is to look for emotional cues in student interactions. When someone conveys an emotion or a feeling, and we miss it,
Hmm.
it can just reduce impact dramatically and create confusion. So are these technology tools that will help you do this at scale. I mean, I think we all wish we had lots of time to read every message and look for this, but at the pace that things go, that's can be tricky to do. And especially tricky to do through digital communications. So there are tools that can help you understand the sentiment and emotion and really flag those at-risk students so that you can intervene with a human when that would be of value. And this is one example, a real example. Just information has been changed to protect to protect everyone. But you can see that the student here is talking about maybe needing to drop their classes because they're pregnant. And this sort of robotic response really just misses the sentiment of distress with this, robot reply. So instead, leveraging technology to identify the sentiment, if you're not able to look at it kind of from a human perspective, and then you can also use AI to either automatically draft or support the drafting of a message that demonstrates caring and empathy.
I know we all hate to admit it, Josie, but I mean, sometimes when we're in the heat of a day and we're stressed and we've got a lot on our plate, like AI can actually be a better thought partner around how to be empathetic when we're facing some of those emotions ourselves, right? So it's a great use case for it. The last thing I think from that we want to touch on in regards to some of these outcomes that we've seen is really thinking about, again, I've talked about data a couple times now, so not to go back at that again, but it is really critical that we start to up level our thoughts around the communication that we have with our students, and the information that's available to us. So I think traditionally we've looked at, when do people open these messages and when do they respond and what, are we getting, the clicks we want? And that's important. But to the point you were just talking about, now we have the ability to go so much deeper than that and really think about the outcomes that we want to achieve. And are we getting those through the information coming back to us, when we think about moods and sentiments and overall student feedback. So that's really critical. And I think this slide's probably just a pretty good restatement of that. So in the interest of time, we could probably continue forward. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the QR code where you can access the reports. There's a 2-year institution version and a 4-year. So this is our state of messaging benchmark report that contains a lot of the information we just talked about, but a whole bunch more, including examples of successful messaging types. So I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that.
And if you miss the code, don't worry, it's on our website. Just go grab it there anytime.
All right. So we're going to transition into a really exciting topic, which is AI assistants and AI agents and how these tools are going to impact us and, really in the near term. We're talking next year, the year after. So before we get into that, we've got another Slido, and we'd love to hear from you all a word that describes how you feel about using AI to support students.
All right. And as people are typing their answer, Tracine asked a question that I think we can answer now, and it's going to come up again a little bit more, which is, do you have data as to how students feel about interacting with an obvious AI outreach or contact? And she's wondering if we are overestimating that students like or appreciate AI impact. I think that's such a great question. Um, I would say that the data we have so far is more sort of AI agent industry agnostic data, which shows that first of all, if you are using AI to interact with students, that should be clear. So don't use an AI agent and mask it as a real person. Make sure it's clear that it's an AI agent, and then always keep a human in the loop. So there should always be a path for a student to make sure that a real human gets involved, and also for the real humans that are supporting the student to be notified or flagged where it looks like they should intervene or get involved. So I know I'm not answering your question directly, Tracy. I think that it's such a great point, and something that we're looking forward to learning more about this year as AI agents get used more and more, and we get more and more response from students. So a lot of mixed feelings around
Yeah.
AI, people feeling cautious, uncertain, some optimism, some love, confidence. So really all over the
Yeah,
map.
wide
And
spectrum here.
yeah, which totally makes sense.
Kind of yucky
All
is a
right.
good one. Did you see that?
Kind of yucky is yeah, that's, oh shoot, I went back. I probably screwed up the thing, but hopefully you see, I feel like I might have accidentally missed a slide.
Nope, no, we're
Okay,
good.
here we go. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you all for taking the time to provide feedback. And we ask that question at just about every interaction point we have with audiences. And the moods are all over the board as we just saw. The reality of it is that it's here. It's here both from a personal and professional perspective. And to the question that was asked, I did review some research that was done last year around kind of student willingness to engage with AI, and both from a support and a teaching perspective, students always score much higher in their willingness than staff and faculty do. So there's a little bit of an interesting gap there. But ultimately, when we think about, let's just hone in on AI as a support mechanism for all of you, and how this can really drive efficiency in your organization. The reality is, and we saw it when we went through all that list of kind of challenges at the beginning, that there are resource constraints we're all figuring out how to deal with. It seems like that's a constant theme, but certainly more top of mind this year and moving into the future. We talked about kind of student expectations, and like bringing that all together is a real challenge, right? We're in a time of compressed resource availability with higher expectations from the people we serve. And we've got staff that are all working really hard and ultimately don't get to spend as much time on the real important work as they would like because of the administrative workloads they all face. And so that's where AI certainly provides an interesting opportunity. Still a lot to learn here. But the power of AI is that it can, and we're going to talk about agents, and we're talking about being able to take some burden off of all of us as individuals to be constantly diligent at data analysis and information gathering and looking for trends with students that might be worrisome. Like all of those are insights now that AI can help bring to the table and actually help us take action on, or from a routine kind of outreach and inquiry perspective, so that when we get to the point where we can have these really impactful conversations, we've got the time to do it. And one of our clients that we work with, um, we found this quote that we really love from Southern New Hampshire University, and it really breaks this apart nicely. And what it talks about is that there's kind of three buckets of work that we all engage with every day to support students. There's the work that our hands are doing, kind of the busy work on computers. There's head work, which I think about as like, okay, I've got all this data now. What do I think about it? And then there's the heart work, which is really where all of us want to spend more of our time. It's that personal interaction where I'm helping move somebody through a challenge, or giving them an additional opportunity that's going to actually make a true impact on their life. That's what everybody on this call came to higher ed to do. But we often get wrapped up in the heads and the head and the hands work. So that's what we think of from an opportunity perspective as such a really important next step for AI.
Mm, great. All right, we have a poll for you. And so go in here and let us know how familiar you are with generative AI, and maybe include in that generative AI and AI agents, which is on the continuum of it. Okay. Practicing is taking the lead. It's interesting to see. We've asked this question for a while now, and certainly people are moving along the journey with AI a bit. Not surprising that pro is 3%. That is pretty typical. All right, so most people are practicing using it occasionally or exploring, trying it out, and then a few people that are starting to enter power user territory. So thank you for sharing that. All right, when we think of a generative AI maturity model, this is a sort of simplified model. At the very base of it, and these are maybe the people that are just hatching, it's using generative AI to help fill in the blanks for you. It's almost like a Google search engine. Um, the second level up is using AI to summarize something for you. So going a step beyond just Google search and actually summarizing a topic or giving you an insight into something, answering a question in a very efficient way. Um, the next level up is to actually research a topic more deeply for you. And then we start to get into moving into the AI agent area. Let me do this for you. And then really AI agent is let me figure out what you want and how to actually make that happen for you. And we're going to dive a bit deeper into these as we go. We wanted to share a bit of a clarity around an AI assistant versus an AI agent, because these are two terms that I think are very have similarities and are often used interchangeably, but mean different things. So an AI assistant, a great example to think about would be like a chat bot. So I'm sure many of you have chat bots on your website for students. I mean, certainly Mongoose customers use Mongoose's chat for this. Um, and that's really intended to help the users with particular tasks that they're trying to do. And an AI assistant will respond to prompts, it's reactive. It can provide information. It can do that kind of summarizing and answering of questions and even suggest next steps, but it has very limited autonomy. On the other side, AI agent, um, an AI system or an AI agent is a system that can really understand the goals that someone is trying to achieve by using it. It can make choices as part of that process and really take action with minimal human involvement. So an AI agent has much greater autonomy. It does planning steps, it does execution or acting steps, and it will monitor and adapt the work that it's doing based on what it learns along the way. So it's really taking that step of doing the work for you.
Yeah, so that's a really important differentiation between the two. And so, just to put it in a little more kind of concrete terms, an example we might think about is an agent that is proactively analyzing student data to look for stop out risks and how that might actually function. So that through in agents in general will always require some level of data integration to be able to determine actions to take based on data signals that might be happening in different systems, right? So here it may be something tied to to an LMS system or your SIS system that flags students as being more at risk. And through that flag, now the agent can proactively take the step of outreach to those students. It can actually, in this case, it may be able to, it would stack rank students based on risk, and you could have different levels of communication outreach and resource options for those students based on their level of risk. But this is happening, largely in an automated fashion. There's, to your point, Josie, like there's always a human in the loop component here where you can see what's happening behind the scenes with these agents. But they're taking this again would be that head work and that hands work, right? I've got to sit down, I've got to look at files and data and think about what this means, and then I need to communicate with certain students. Like if we can take that out of it and ultimately use agents to identify, communicate, and provide us with next steps, where imagine being able to, through an AI agent, book a meeting with an advisor or some other faculty member to talk about this risk, and then getting that all summarized back to each party, right? So the student has a view from the agent of the things to do to prepare for that meeting. The individual advisor has a checklist of things that have been collected through the agent to set up that conversation. Wow, that like now that's taken away 70% of the busy work I would do, and I can really focus on helping this student.
Mhm.
And so I guess what we want to encourage when we have this conversation, oftentimes one of the things people express is a fear that AI is here to take my job. And we can confidently say from all of the things that we've seen and the work that we're doing that this is a multiplier to you and your staff as opposed to a threat. And so think of it as bench strength. Think of it as a way to augment your work and to provide, ultimately a workforce. If we think about workforce, as both people and agents that are aligned and working together to outcomes and that are helping make the humans just that much more efficient in their day-to-day activities.
Mm. Yeah, such an important concept to think of this little AI agent workforce that can be supporting each of you and your team members and getting more time for the hard work and letting us do all of our work at greater scale, which is so important today, greater efficiency and scale. So just to call back, you remember at the beginning of the webinar, we talked about this slide, like what is failure really? So I wanted to just go through now and take a few minutes to address how you can solve all of these different gaps. So thinking about using conversation intelligence, so that is those kind of data-driven insights into things like student sentiment, conversation resolution, emotions, that sort of thing. And then AI agents. And AI agents can have very specific tasks to broader tasks. So you can think about AI agents as using AI to do jobs for you. And of course, there can be lots of different types of jobs that are done. You can use those technologies to notify the confusion sentiment that it might exist when someone has a low understanding, but they're ready to act, and tell them what to do and help them do it. You can enable trust by noticing when something is stalling out or having AI notice when something is stalling out or not being resolved and help students understand here's what to do next. Let's get some clarity on what you actually need to do and answer your questions and check in on how you're feeling. You can also enable that capacity. So notice using AI to notice when there's stress happening with the student that's maybe going to reduce their willingness to act or their ability to act, and providing that empathetic support as well as bringing in the human in the loop for those at-risk student situations where ultimately they need to sit down and have a conversation with a real human. And then finally, you can really succeed in that upper quadrant and get rid of those little frictions that are impacting the student experience and reducing their ability to take the next step with whatever it might be.
All right. Well, we're here. We're here at the end, Josie. I can't believe it.
Yeah, we made it in
We made it.
time. Got a few
Yeah, I
minutes.
know. So we'll have a few minutes for additional questions. I've been answering some in the chat as well, but I think as we think about, where we started today and we think about the the journey that we're all on, which is to provide a more impactful educational experience for the students and adult learners that we support. We ultimately see a future using tools and technology to make the experience more human. And we really believe that there is an opportunity to do that by pulling the noise away from our staff members and from our students in a way that helps them, have a simpler, less complex experience. It also is an opportunity to really drive automation into those areas that can allow everyone on our campus to focus on higher value work and outcomes. Like that's, I know, a challenge for everybody in the higher education space today. We also see these tools as an opportunity to help our staff not only develop the skills to be more connected and empathetic, but to give them the space to do that. Because let's be honest, like not every one of our staff members has that toolkit, but the tools that we can provide through AI analysis and that some of the things we looked at today can help open those doors to really understanding where staff need additional training, support, and development, because that's going to ultimately translate to more trust with the student. We know that to be true through all of the studies we do. So, and ultimately, these tools will get us out of the place where we're just looking at a bunch of data, but instead we're looking at the recommendations on what to do to improve our processes today based on data. That's a big shift for all of us, right? Because everybody on this call has way more charts, graphs, and insights than they have time to analyze. We can use these tools to really drive that experience to a different level, and help us improve our organizations, because ultimately that will lead to better student outcomes. Last resource that we have available for you all, we have a playbook or a platform book that really dives deeper into the conversation intelligence tools that Mongoose offers. There's another QR code. You're welcome to access that both here and through our website. For myself, thank you so much for the time and the engagement today. Josie, closing words?
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly squeeze in one more question,
Yes.
which is the quick question was, how do we effectively help students who are not college ready, who are starting their first year? And this person was referring to a UC San Diego report on the decline in freshman quality. I think this is absolutely, I mean, it's what we see our customers doing today with text and conversation intelligence, really looking at that first year segment of the population and even sub-segmenting it into different types of first year students and using conversations, so text, and so on, but also the intelligence side to set up an ongoing engagement with students. So you're creating that engagement level, that sense of belonging, and that back and forth. And we have a lot of, for those of you that are interested in diving deeper into that, we have a lot of great case studies on our website, across the whole student life cycle, where you can learn about what institutions are doing for topics like this. So I know we've reached the end of our time here. Thank you so much for joining. We're so excited to see what a great turnout we got for this topic. And we hope that we will be working with some of you in the years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.